Right, welcome to the second of the U.S. Halal Consultants free live webinars. I'm Elizabeth Myers, the co-founder and executive vice president of U.S. Halal Consultants, and we launched the group at the beginning of the year to help businesses navigate the U.S. halal market. U.S. Consultants, Halal Consultants is the only consulting group in the U.S. that focuses on helping businesses enter, operate, and/or expand in the halal space. As a matter of pure economics, it's profitable for companies to innovate to meet consumer demand, and halal is healthy, and there is a fast-growing demand. So after 3 years of presenting the annual Halal Expo and Summit USA, we are filling a gap in what companies need to do to meet that consumer demand. So U.S. Halal Consultants has an impressive roster of experts and founding member consultants that are here to help you as a business get into the space if you're not in it already, or expand in the space. Our guest experts today are member consultants of USHC, and their services are available through us. And before I introduce them, let me just say that USHC is a membership organization, and membership is open to both consultants and businesses. So we're glad that you're here with us today on our Facebook Live, and we want to hear from you. So please say hello in the comments, tell us where you are in the world, and ask any questions pertaining to today's subject. So today's webinar, we're going to address doing business in the international halal market, and that is a multi-billion-dollar global market. It involves getting certain certifications and accreditations in the space in order to operate and to export into foreign countries. And not only that, but to have the credibility and assurance for consumers that your products are actually halal. So we're fortunate to have with us today 2 of our member consultants with deep expertise in the area of accreditation and certification. First, we have with us Dr. Peter Unger. He's the Vice President and Principal Consultant of IQEIS and the President Emeritus of A2LA. He's been involved with accreditation since around 1978. He knows an awful lot about it. He's served in various positions, including as an associate manager of the Laboratory of Accreditation at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, and also as chair of the International Laboratory, American pronunciation, Accreditation Cooperation, ILAC. He's authored many papers on accreditation and was also an active participant in the establishment of the ISO IEC standards for accreditation. With us also, we have Habib Ghanem, who is the president and CEO of the U.S. Halal Chamber of Commerce and the director of ISWA Halal Certification Department. He has over 21 years in the field of certification and accreditation. The U.S. Halal Chamber of Commerce and ISWA, the ISWA Halal certification body, are internationally recognized halal certification bodies, which are accredited also HCBs. Habib has an educational background in accounting from the University of DC and also project management from Phoenix University. So welcome to both of you, gentlemen. It's great to have you. And I would like to start with Peter, who has a short presentation, and he's going to tell us what companies need to know about doing business internationally in the halal space, and talk about some of the regulatory structure and the bodies that exist and the kinds of certifications or accreditations you need to get in order to operate in the space. So let me bring in Dr. Peter Unger.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about my favorite subject. I think accreditation, this 5-syllable word that can be very confusing to people who are not familiar with the subject, and they confuse it a lot with certification. I think, Marwan, you are going to share my screen, my slides, I believe. Is that correct? Coming up. There we go. Yes, there it is. There it was.
Yeah, I'll just mention, we're using a new platform for this webinar, and so we may have a few little technical glitches to work out this time, but we are all learning in the virtual space.
Well, I can continue with a brief discussion about history. As you mentioned that I was involved in accreditation since 1978. A lot has evolved over time, and I ended up retiring a few years ago, but do consulting with halal certification bodies as well as other types of conformity assessment bodies and accreditation bodies. We have, and also working with organizations that need to get their product certified, which is really the bottom line for getting global acceptance. Okay, we do have the slide, Joe. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, just to make sure everybody is understanding of the difference between certification and accreditation. Certification is by a third party, and it's an attestation related to object of conformity assessment. What is the object of conformity assessment? A product, like a halal product, a food product, cosmetic product, a process, or a management system. These three types of objects can be certified. It does not include accreditation. Next. Accreditation is done as an independent recognition that conformity assessment bodies themselves are competent and operate impartially with regard to making sure that laboratories are carrying out tests properly, that inspection bodies are doing and competent to do inspections for which they're accredited, and certificates or certifications for product certification bodies that indeed they've demonstrated competence to ensure that their clients are providing appropriately certified halal product on the marketplace. Next. Thank you. So the whole point, and I think Elizabeth alluded to it, we're in the business of providing confidence and assurance in the halal marketplace. It is virtually impossible for the end item consumer to really understand or determine whether a product is actually halal or not, whether it was produced in accordance with halal principles. So that is the whole point of having competent certification bodies, recognized accreditation bodies to accredit the certification bodies, to ensure the marketplace is indeed providing reliable halal products. Next slide. This is a pyramid, if you will, that basically illustrates what's involved. At the bottom of the pyramid, of course, we were trying to provide products and service providers providing reliable halal products so that when government has confidence that the products are halal and meeting the regulations, but customers and consumers can trust the product is being halal, and that purchasers can be assured that the product is halal. And this process is done by conformity assessment bodies, primarily product certification bodies, that are operating in accordance with international standards that are primarily designed or developed by international organizations, which we'll talk about in subsequent slides. The standards for the products themselves, there are numerous standards out there, and we'll mention briefly some of them. But how do we know, though, that the conformity assessment bodies, that the certification bodies are competent? We do this through accreditation, and there are international standards for accreditation of conformity assessment bodies, and there are requirements for accreditation bodies, international standards. And at the apex of this pyramid is a process that's done globally among accreditation bodies to do peer evaluation of each other to ensure that the accreditation bodies are providing reliable accreditations. And this is done through major organizations. I think Elizabeth mentioned the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation, and also the International Accreditation Forum, which deals with accreditation of certification bodies. And there is a halal cooperation of accreditation bodies called IHAF, International Halal Accreditation Cooperation, which has also been developing a system of peer evaluation to recognize competent halal accreditation bodies. Next slide. So our experience in the last few years of getting involved with helping out a couple of certification bodies to get accredited, we bring to the table the ISO Conformity Assessment Committee standards, which is a series of, they're dubbed 17,000 series, which are standards for accreditation bodies, standards for certification bodies, and also some guidance documents for certification bodies as well. The Organization of Islamic Countries, Standards and Metrology Institute for Islamic Countries, CIMIC, also has developed requirements for accreditation and certification. But indeed, there's also the Gulf Standards Organization, which has adopted standards for certification bodies and accreditation bodies. UAE, in the Emirates Standards and Metrology Authority, has developed equivalent standards to the Gulf standards. And there are other countries that are involved in developing standards in Malaysia, particularly Singapore, Egypt, and this is not a complete list, by the way. So we have had some real-time experience in developing and helping halal certification bodies attain accreditation through training and internal auditing, and that's something that Habib can certainly talk about. Next slide. Okay, the basic standards for certification and accreditation are these three from ISO 17,011, which deals with the requirements for accreditation bodies, 17,065, which deals with the requirements for product certification bodies, and 17,021 requirements for the competence of certification bodies for management systems like ISO 9000 and a number of other types of management systems. So next slide. Okay, this is a relatively comprehensive list, but perhaps not all standards for halal food are on this list. I would like to ask Habib, in particular, there are some standards that are coming out of CIMIC lately, and in fact, I think there's a new CIMIC standard for halal food, which was just issued, I believe, in 2020. I have the 2011 version listed, but that is the list that a lot of the certification bodies have had to implement in order to make sure their clients are meeting these standards. And they have the system of auditing these clients' production processes, warehousing, transportation, supply chain. And I'd like to ask Habib to give me a little bit of idea of how the CIMIC process of developing standards for the Islamic countries is working and how it's disseminated around the world. You'll note that there are other standards coming from GSO, Malaysia, Singapore, etc.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Your presentation actually definitely is back and forth with what we were going to discuss. The biggest one, if you can put the screen up again, Marwan. Yeah, the one that we are involved mainly because GSO 993 is one of the standards that is very critical that CIMIC is involved with, where only a Muslim can do the 993, the animal slaughtering requirements. It also gets down to some the stunning issues, which I will get into. But CIMIC is a collection of all the standards in all the Muslim countries and the Islamic world, and then they also incorporate IHAP and ILAP and many of the ISO 2200, ISO 9001, and the most important one is 17065 and 1711. Unfortunately, in order for you to understand what I'm saying, we have to go into each standard, and that is a whole course by itself, and Peter can tell you that. So CIMIC is officially now the one that is going to apply to all. We are trying to get, I'm a member in their technical committee also. I was there in their meeting 2 years ago, but last year I didn't go because of Corona. They have...
Excuse me, Habib, let me just jump in. There's a muezzin in the background. I don't know if it's an alarm. It keeps going over and over. Could we stop that? Maybe it's a bit distracting.
Hold on. Okay, let me do that then. I have to
so
get
much.
up and go. It's on the other room. I have to go up. Okay, let me go get it.
So perhaps Peter, you can maybe skip over and we can come back to Habib.
The next slide.
These are the dangers of being in the home office.
Yes. Oh, yes. There are a lot of unforeseen noises that could happen, especially in an urban environment. Okay, this is one of the slides that I really wanted to make sure we get across to clients, manufacturers. There are very strong prescriptive requirements that are for halal management systems of any manufacturer of any product that are quite similar to ISO 9001, which are general requirements for quality management systems. But there are additional risk management requirements that have been recently introduced in the standards in CIMIC and Malaysia in particular, not only covering the manufacturer, the processing plant, but the warehouse and the transportation facilities that are in place. So there's additional supply chain requirements. Impartiality is a major emphasis. In other words, the third-party certification bodies have to be impeccably impartial in doing their certifications. And that the requirements for impartiality are very, very strong. Anyone making food, processing food, have to have a food safety management system with a hazard analysis, critical control point, and risk assessment mitigation efforts in place, and they're required to be demonstrated to the certification body. And accreditation of halal certification body has really become a necessity in some global markets, particularly in the Mideast, but it's also in Asia, and it's becoming something that cannot be avoided anymore. I want to just say the good news is there's a lot of reliance on ISO standards. The GSO standards, the CIMIC standards, have indeed used the text to a large extent of the ISO international standards and integrated them into the halal standards. On the other hand, less good news, there's a proliferation of national standards which do not differ very much with ISO and CIMIC standards, but it requires the attention for every nuance of difference, which then means one has to purchase the standards. And it's one thing, by the way, the certification body, in effect, can do for the client, and that is to distill all the subtle differences of the various national standards, integrate that into their checklist for doing their audits, and assuring that the client's product can go to Malaysia, can go to UAE, can go to Saudi Arabia, and without the client really having to try to understand this myriad of national standards.
Peter, may I?
Yeah, go ahead, Habib. I was going to
Yeah,
ask.
this is my area right there. Okay. Unfortunately, what you call less good news is really bad news, because we are subjected, when I mean we, the whole halal industry, especially the halal certification bodies, have to meet every country's official recognition. And this is where I hate to use the word, but it's a fact. Corruption comes in. Uh, Indonesia has MUI and BPJPH. You have Singapore MUIS, and Malaysia has JAKIM. These are just some examples. Japan has theirs. Korea has theirs. So what has happened is that even if you are internationally recognized, like with IAC or JAC or even CIMIC, you still have to go to these sub regions, and they have to come and check you out, which is an additional cost for accreditation. And then they have to put you on a registration list of approved halal certification bodies. And this is where the whole industry is in a mess, in my opinion. And this is what I've been fighting with CIMIC to stop. So it's a big problem that we have. And what Peter was saying earlier, if we can get all those standards, which we do have from Malaysia, Indonesia, all those places, and put it in our checklist. When I mean by checklist, it's when our auditors are doing their work, and our auditors are trained by people like IQS and Jack. They have training courses, and then they will have to issue a certificate. You just cannot say that you have the training. You have to attend the course, whether it's 2 days or 3 days or 1 day, and then you have the evidence. I will get into the other area if you can show the screen, share the screen again, Marwan. Okay, the part that I wanted to add, I believe, is the next screen, not that one. The next screen.
Or the last one.
Oh, that's the last one. Okay, go back up. Go back. Okay, this one exactly. I mentioned before the Adhan came on about 993. This is the most critical part that brings problems with even big certification bodies, where they have to have specific training, and we have had issues with stunning or hand slaughter or mechanical slaughter. Some countries accept it, some don't. It's very complicated, and the amount of voltage used. This is where we have to go by all the generally accepted halal standards. So the GSO and all of that. GSO, especially the following the ISO 9001. I don't see it on this list, but Malaysia have new standards. They have the 1500, and they have eased up a little bit on some of this, but it's still complicated. I hope, I hope that everybody will follow the OIC, which means Organization of Islamic Countries, the CIMIC standards, which represents all the guidelines for halal for Islamic countries, would be adopted, so we can anybody who is an accredited halal certifier can issue a certificate that will be accepted anywhere in the world. So I have a lot more to say on my experiences here, and that not many people know. And I will start to be general here if Elizabeth allows me, because I'm a very practical person. The problem we have in our community is that somebody called Ahmed Marwan, he has a big beard, he's a Muslim. He said, "Oh, I'm a Muslim, it's halal." So that is not acceptable, and that has been a big problem in our community, And some people will go to a butcher and buy from a butcher. They don't, he delivers it, they don't know whether it's done properly or not, and there is no paperwork. The only way to find out is if there is a third party, an independent third party verification system, which Peter was talking about. We have committees that are involved in impartiality. So you cannot just say that I am so and so, I am a Muslim, so it's halal. You have to have documentation and a process. And the sad part is that when people go to their stores and they ask for paperwork, they said, "Oh, go and ask Habib, go and ask Marwan," but they don't have papers, because what many are doing, they try to get some halal and they get non-halal and they mix it. This is a local problem and worldwide problem to read to compromise and to reduce costs. So I don't want to get into the details, but generally speaking, we only talk about the good side. So we encourage everybody, if you want to do it, put a budget, get proper training from people like IQUIS or Jack, and so that you will be doing the right thing for the consumer. And Marwan knows why it's very critical. We're talking about another organization, the American Halal Council, where verification is an important issue apart from advocacy. So, with that, I will open the floor for questions, because it's really a big, big area, and unless I touch into specifics, like Peter will tell you, there are about almost 100 items that we have not even touched. So, is there any question?
So thank you, both of you, Dr. Peter Unger and Habiba Ghanem. Very, very poignant remarks. I'm not sure that we have any questions yet from the audience, but let me jump in here, because our last or our first actually webinar last month addressed issues on the domestic side of how you ensure consumer confidence in the halal product or service or whatever it is, and in the U.S. And in the US, of course, we have a system of federal and state regulation, federalism, where there are certain overarching federal standards which pretty much govern labeling. And then certain states, only about 9 of them at the moment, have their own regulation of the halal space, and mostly to do with regulating halal food and the mislabeling of it and fraudulent misrepresentation about what is halal when it isn't. And there are obviously some criminal sanctions and definitely civil penalties for doing this. Are there similar kinds of enforcement mechanisms on the international side that
Yes,
companies
yes,
need to be worried about if they don't
yes,
comply with
defi-
these
definitely.
certifications and accreditations?
Definitely, Elizabeth, you bring up a very good point. The U.S. government, they they are not promoting Islam or halal. They just want to make sure that if you label something kosher, it is kosher. If you label something vegan, it is vegan. If you label something halal, it has to be halal. Especially they meet the basic standard. Yes, to answer your question, the international aspect, halal certification bodies can be charged for non-compliance uh, if they do not comply, and they have to correct the NCs. And I think I will leave that part to Peter because we've had a few cases in the past. Peter, you need to unmute yourself.
Yes, one of the getting back to the domestic market as well as the international market, but there are a number of certification bodies in the business that are not accredited, that are not following the international standards, and particularly on issues of impartiality, because they might be consulting with a client at the same time they're certifying the product, and that is absolutely forbidden. To be doing that, you wouldn't be accredited if you were doing consulting as well as certifying the same client's product. So that's something that there's been a lot of activity like that in the marketplace. And one reason why the requirement for accreditation of certification bodies has emerged, particularly United Arab Emirates definitely has been pushing for accreditation of certification bodies because they recognize and have had past experience of certification marks coming from certification bodies that are not operating in accordance with the international standards. And so you really have to have confidence that your certification body is operating in accordance with international standards. And really the only way to do that in an objective, thorough way is to have an accreditation of the certification body itself. It's not an easy process. Habib can tell you it is not an easy process. And manufacturers meeting and getting their products certified is not an easy process either. So
It's not,
Nor
yeah,
is it
you're
free.
right. You're right. It's not easy, but once your system is in place, then it becomes a smooth process. And now we have the remote system thanks to COVID-19, except for new clients. It is a major problem what Peter said about self-certifiers or somebody who just goes and kills a goat in Northern Virginia and sells it to some shops in Lebanese butcher or something like that. So without paperwork, they just take their word for it. With the international accreditation and the certification system and the verification system, there must be documentation. I'll give you a typical example. If somebody buys from, say, ABC, and they say they do the slaughtering themselves, they deliver to CDF shop in Vienna, Virginia. That person in Vienna say, "Oh, I got it from Ahmed or Mohammed." This is not enough for us to do the verification. We need documentation, and there should be a third party involved. The only way we can really check, if we go to Mr. Mohammed who slaughtered it and saw how he's doing it, and if the man can provide us an invoice, and we have to verify how much he bought and how much he's selling, it's almost like an audit, So many people are very, very hesitant to comply. So I could support what Peter said. That is a big problem. That's why what Marwan is doing is a very honorable job to educate the people and let them demand. If they say the product is halal, they have to have a halal certificate. Peter, I leave it back to you.
Excellent, thank you. We've been greeted by someone in the Philippines, a Halal Association from the Philippines. So I want to say salam to you as well. And also to recognize, we keep talking about Marwan. Who's Marwan? Marwan Ahmed is the president, the CEO of the U.S. Halal Consultants Group. And thank you for running the operation of the webinar today, Marwan, on this new platform. I think it's doing well. So I want to encourage audience members to ask your questions. This is the moment to get them answered live in real time by real experts. And so as we're hoping to get some more questions, it sounds like dealing and negotiating with all of the different standards across the world, across all of the countries, is pretty complicated. Is there a base standard? Is there? I'm thinking like in accounting, you have the generally accepted accounting protocols. I guess it is the GAP standards.
That is CIMIC.
That's the CIMIC one. Okay.
Yes. What you just hit it right on the nail, because I'm an accountant also. Generally accepted accounting principle. CIMIC will do exactly that. And the reason why it happened that way, Elizabeth, is because in the old days, I'm talking about when I started in the early 80s, it was basically a local thing. And every country that you ship to, the USDA will say you have to abide by their standards. So each country had their own basic standards. Philippines is one of them, and I think I know Mr. Linzak there from Philippines, and even from with pineapples and all of that. So even though they may be basic, but you can have meat and you fry it in lard, then it becomes haram, for the processed items. Lard meaning pig fat, So there are many, many issues and examples. That's why we do specific things. So to overcome all of this, we should all support CIMIC so that by the end of this year, everybody will abide by the CIMIC standards, which is a generally accepted halal standards or whatever. And so that if somebody is accredited first, then they can issue a certificate based on the CIMIC standards, and it will be accepted in the USA, it will be accepted in UK, it will be accepted in Philippines, Malaysia, Japan, Korea, and even Sri Lanka.
So Habib, when you say support, how can people support that? How can businesses or organizations that are operating in the halal space to try and coordinate standards and make operations easier for halal companies to negotiate? How can they support that?
It's very simple.
And also, is it reasonable that we could see a standard by the end of the year?
It's very simple, Elizabeth. They have to insist on having the generally accepted halal standards by CIMIC, and they should insist to their governments or their authorities that, look, we want something that will be applicable for all the countries. Now, there are some that would want to deviate a little bit, which is okay, but you can put it in your label that this is hand slaughtered or this is not stunned. Yes, that can be done. And CIMIC has a table for that. So it's based on the labeling, and yes, everybody. I'm encouraging every business person, every plant, and every body in the government, local and international, to insist that they want to use the CIMIC standards, which is it includes everybody across the board, different madhabs. Madhab means like a school of thought. Some would accept this. So as long as there's compliance with the CIMIC standards, you can use that and issue a certificate based on that, as long as you have some I forgot the English word, the not clearance, some
Guidance?
not guidance, to show that it is clear,
Oh,
transparency,
clarification. Oh,
trans, trans,
transparency. Yeah.
transparency, and that's it. So CIMIC is the answer to all of this. I have been doing it for over 30 years. Officially, privately, I was one of those, you know, 1 man or 2 man show, 30 years ago. Until now, we are very professional, which Peter can tell you. We have several committees. We have to abide, and believe me, Elizabeth, Peter will tell you it's not cheap, but once you get it done, the companies will pay. I used to be worried that the companies will say, oh, it's too expensive. No. Even when we increased our price by 100%, they still paid.
So we have a question from the audience, and it's to do with contamination. Is there a way to control the contamination of halal certified products?
I think that's my area. Peter does the accreditation. We do certification. We have a checklist. And I am glad he asked this question. In fact, I overlooked it even. Thank you, Mr. Ismail. The question is, how do you find? There is a requirement in our accreditation that we have to have. We are required. It's compulsory that we do testing, especially for further processed items, not only raw. And the lab has to be approved by somebody like A2LA. It must be 17065 approved lab. And then that test result will tell us what is there, what is contaminant. We can even tell the different types of meat, not only porcine and alcohol. So the way to control it, that contaminations or whatever, is through lab, approved lab, not any lab. It has to be an approved lab.
So may I add, CIMIC recently has issued standards for warehousing and transportation, all of which could potentially cause contamination, even if the product is produced properly. Once it leaves the plant, who knows? And they have requirements now for warehousing the product, and that could any place where the product is stored. They have developed principles, risk management principles, scientifically based regulatory process in effect has to be followed in order to mitigate or prevent contamination. And that includes transportation and trucks and so forth. So that has been recognized, and how one goes about auditing those warehousing and transportation facilities is a challenge, but I think it's doable, and that's part of what the certification body should be paying attention to.
So how perhaps that kind of training is part of certification, but how do companies get the kinds of knowledge that they need to know? Are there trainings that they can go to? Are there bodies that offer such trainings for companies to actually know what they're getting into before they get into even the process?
Yes, I think one of them you have right here is someone like Peter's group. There are a few bodies like CIMIC offers some classes. Jack means golf accreditation Council. Okay, they offer some classes, but it's only specific to their standard. But this is one thing that I think you, Elizabeth Myers, and Marwan Ahmed, and US consultant can do if we can organize some trainings to educate people. It comes under advocacy, and people don't tell me that it's for free. I don't want to hear the word free. They have to pay. You know, I know Marwan likes to help and advocate things, but anybody who comes to the class to be educated, because you have professionals like me doing the Islamic part, Peter doing the technical part. Then when they come to the US Halal consultants to get training and you issue a certificate for them, they have to pay, whether it's a 1 day course or half a day course, and that they can use that to say, look, we have been trained and we know this, and they can be more productive in the halal industry and the halal arena. Okay, Peter.
This is what IQUIS is all about. We provide training in ISO 9001, 22000, risk management. And so that we're available to go to clients that want to understand what they need to do in order to get their product certified, and we're more than happy to do that.
Yeah, what Elizabeth is saying, Peter, is that many people don't know about you exactly, but if we do it under the platform of US Halal consultants, and then you, of course, will be paid for your services or whatever, and then US Halal consultants would do a training to educate people, and they pay for it. It's like going to school. It's like going to school. This is my suggestion. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you for the suggestion, Habib. We are looking into doing that in other areas, including FDA regulation and compliance that we talked about last month. So this is definitely an area that we will also hopefully be preparing some kind of program that members can take advantage of. The public can also join us as well. But as Habib correctly notes, what we're doing today is for free. This is the teaser to show you the complications that are out there in terms of international regulation and standards and certification, etc., that applies to the halal space, and that these two gentlemen we have with us today, our expert member consultants, have decades, and 50 years between them of experience in this space. And that experience doesn't come lightly. So yes, hopefully in the near future, we will be organizing some training sessions on this and other areas. So stay tuned.
And charge people. Please don't make it free. No. I'm very serious.
This expertise was not obtained for free by you or by Dr. Unger and or by Marwan Ahmed or even myself. So absolutely, it will have to be appropriately charged for.
Yeah, even if
remember, because there will be discounts.
No, believe me, if you don't charge, people will think it's useless.
That it's not worth anything. Exactly.
And by the way, at the end of the training, you will provide them a certificate. And Peter is very good at giving quizzes to make sure they've been listening to the lecture. And if you don't have, if you fail or you don't answer, you don't get a certificate. Am I right, Peter?
Yeah. Yes.
I was wondering, the acronym IQUIS. It could be called IQUIS.
We're available to discuss what ways we could help in the marketplace, halal marketplace. With regard to the ISO standards, that's what I've been involved in, and the way they've been adapted by CIMIC and the other halal standards. We're very familiar with what they've done, and to a large extent, they are abiding by the ISO standards for certification and accreditation. Thankfully, because we don't want to have a proliferation of different standards.
Right.
Anyhow, I see that Maria is wants to ask a question. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. Marwan, am I right or wrong?
I don't see a question by Maria.
Yes,
She
yeah,
was
it
on
was.
earlier.
Oh, okay.
Muzaffar. Yeah. But please, we have about 10
Oh,
minutes
she's
left of
on.
this
She's on.
program. And let's anybody who has questions or concerns, issues that have come up, this is the chance you have to ask them before I give both Peter and Habib an opportunity to make their closing remarks if they'd like. So please, again, tell us where you are, tell us your questions.
Yeah,
So I'm
I've
not.
been. Oh, go ahead. Is that Maria? Oh,
No, that was me. I'm not hearing any. I'm not seeing any questions coming up. So go ahead, Habib.
what I was saying is that if it is properly advertised to educate people, both you will be amazed. Even the local distributors and the local shops can attend, and they don't have to come in person. Normally, in the old days, you have to come in person. Thank God for technology and this new one called StreamYard. I think they can be in their stores or at home and attend. Like I'm
Yeah,
doing now. So but they
I,
have to pay. They have to pay. I
sure.
don't. I really don't like the free uh, part of it, because we paid over 200,000 to be, or maybe 300,000 now in 5 years, to get accredited. And it's unfair for somebody to just open a shop and say I'm halal and that's it, and they don't issue certificates. It's not right.
Right. Of course, of course. People need to be paid for sure for their expertise and for the effort they've put into uh, becoming a certification or accreditation body, whatever it may be.
And most of all, the traceability, and to follow the paperwork, to
Paper trail.
know that paper trail. Exactly. Thank you, Elizabeth. The paper trail is very important. Like I said, if I go to a store, say Lebanese butcher in Alexandria, I said, I want to check, show me your invoices. Do you think he will give it to me as an outsider like that? No. But if I'm the certifier or the verifier that is legally recognized, then he will have to do it.
Right. Well, this is all about consumer confidence in the market and in the products and services that are being provided, that the bodies that are certifying those products are actual proper certifiers as well
Thank
and
you.
have
Thank
the
you.
credential and the training to do that and make sure that things conform to the standards, whichever standards you're working with. And so this is important. Since we're getting close to the end of the show, there's a comment by Halal Expo USA. Thank you very much. I totally agree with the paid model. Absolutely. Um, and do you guys have some final words for companies to consider when they are either trying to expand in this space or to even enter the international market?
I
Or
I think I have something, and I will let Peter do the final closure. I encourage them to
Oh,
have training. Number one, even if you are in a butcher, you have to follow USDA guidance, on how to handle the meat. There are certain things that many people don't know. When you use a knife, it doesn't have to have a wooden handle, because that can capture bacteria. So it has to be a plastic handle. The length of the knife matters. The environment, the cleanliness, because I want to close with this. In the Holy Quran, every time halal is mentioned, they use the word tayyiban. Tayyiban means wholesome and clean. So even if you have been approved, you have to have continuous training. Peter will tell you, my staff have been trained for 5 6 years, but we're having internal training again. It's very important. It's like you go to a refresher course. You are a doctor, and usually they have refresher courses, even though you've been a doctor for 20 years. Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Mr. Marwan Ahmed. And I appreciate it. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
You're very welcome. And Dr. Unger, would you like to have the last word?
Yes, Elizabeth, thank you. I just want to say the first step, I think, for anybody that's making halal product for the international marketplace, for that matter, the domestic marketplace, the first investment, I think, is to get the relevant standards. And that's, most of them are not free. They have to be purchased. And that's the first step. And then if there's a need for training, IQUIS is more than happy to provide that kind of training, from especially the ISO standards and the relevant halal standards that relate to accreditation certification. Thank you very much again, Elizabeth, Marwan, Habib, appreciate it. And thank you, audience, for paying attention.
Gentlemen, Dr. Peter Unger, Habib Ghanem, thank you so much for being with us in this short webinar that simply provides a taste of what's out there to know about when you want to operate in the international halal space. And we encourage you to join U.S. Halal Consultants as a member, either as a business, or if you're a consultant, apply for membership with us. So that you have an opportunity to present webinars like this. And we look forward to having you next month's webinar. And it will be, actually, we'll put the details in the chat. And for any further questions, please contact us through our webpage. We'll put that also in the chat. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks very much for being with us.
By the way, is it being recorded?
Bye-bye.
I believe we have recorded it, yes,
Yes,
but
so
it will
in
be
case-
available on the webpage.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.